Welcome to today's episode of The Key. I'm Sarah Custer, the new editor-in-chief at Inside Higher Ed. We're excited to bring you a special re-airing of a thought-provoking session on AI from the Digital Universities U.S. event we held at Washington University in May. This episode features Inside Higher Ed's Colleen Flaherty leading a workshop featuring experts Asim Ali, Trey Conatser, Emily Thompson, and Michael Reese. We're sharing this episode with our listeners again as they continue to grapple with the role of generative AI in teaching and learning. Tune in to gain valuable perspectives and practical advice on faculty support, bridging potential gaps in access, and overcoming bias in the technology. Enjoy!
This episode of The Key is sponsored by Mongoose, a holistic higher ed engagement partner that empowers institutions to connect with prospective and current students, as well as alumni and donors, through text, chat, and actionable insights. Mongoose, designed for higher ed, by higher ed, is committed to helping leaders like you advance your university's mission. Learn more today at www.hellomongoose.com.
According to a late 2023 study by Titan Partners, about half of college students were regularly using Gen AI tools compared to about a quarter of faculty members. And it's probably fair to say that those numbers have increased yet, but the ratios remain the same. Titan refers to this as, quote, an enormous experience gap between these two user groups. And that's partly because regular faculty AI users were more likely to have a positive outlook regarding Gen AI tools' potential to enhance student learning. And they were more likely to report using Gen AI to create engaging fast activities, assessments, and more. Interestingly, regardless of their own familiarity and embrace of Gen AI tools, most faculty members believe that students must learn how to work with AI tools for their professional success. And they see helping students develop AI skills as an institutional responsibility. So students certainly agree with this idea. In a separate survey of 2- and 4-year college students that Inside Higher Ed conducted in January with College Pulse as part of our Student Voice series, about half of students said that the rise of AI was influencing what they intended to study and pursue as a career, with some interesting differences there by gender and first-generation status and other demographic factors. Overall, though, about 3 in 4 students said that their college and university should be preparing them for Gen AI and AI in general in the workplace. And as for just how institutions should be doing that, students' number one priority was actually being taught the ethics of using AI, with nearly 3 in 4 students selecting this. That was followed by teaching core skills like critical thinking and separately teaching the practical ins and outs of using AI at about 2 and 3 students each. And an interesting statistic for me personally was that just 28% of students said that their institution should prepare them for AI and work by encouraging career paths that are less likely to be impacted by AI. So students definitely see this as part of their future. Last few data points. In Inside Higher Ed and Hanover Research's recent surveys of presidents and separately provosts, most respondents said that their institution has not yet published a policy governing the use of AI, including in teaching and research. Just 14% of provosts said that their institution has reviewed the curriculum to ensure that it's adequately preparing students for AI in the workplace. And nearly all of provosts said that their faculty members had asked for AI training in the last 18 months, while about 3 in 4 provosts said that they'd provided such training. So to review, we know that A, student adoption of Gen AI is outpacing faculty adoption. B, that students expect their institutions to be training them both ethically and practically on how to use AI, as well as boosting their core or supposedly AI-resistant skills. And C, that most institutions do not yet have policies governing the use of AI, including in teaching and research. And the D, most faculty members want help here. So all of this, I think, can be summed up by the upshot of the Titan report, which states that there's a significant need for AI literacy and support across institutions and support for faculty, staff, and learners to understand the uses and implications of these tools inside and out the classroom. So all of this leads me to the questions that we'll be considering here today in small groups during our workshop on the benefits and risks of teaching with generative AI.
At this point, the audience broke up into 4 groups to discuss the first of several questions, focusing on their perceptions of the risks and benefits of using generative AI in teaching and learning, with particular attention to specific use cases and applications. What you'll hear next are how the various group leaders reported out of their sessions, and you'll hear in order from Trey Conatser, Michael Reese, Emily Thompson, and Asim Ali.
So I'm going to ask Trey, if you wouldn't mind, to share with us in 30 seconds or less, what has risen to the top of your conversation?
So a lot of conversation around use cases around prompting. So kind of meta conversations we were having here, not necessarily discipline-based applications, but regardless, at this particular moment at least, at this dawn of generative AI in education, these kind of applications always have a meta level of outcomes of teaching students to be responsible users of generative AI, effective and skillful users of generative AI, and reflective users in terms of what the output really is, whether the output changes if we change our strategy for interacting with AI, and what all that means in terms of how the AI was put together so that students develop that critical consciousness around the technology itself in kind of a larger framework or larger ecosystem. I think that's 30 seconds, yes. So I'll stop it there. 29.
Great. Mike.
Thanks, Colleen. I'll try to summarize a lot of great comments quickly. I think we were hearing a lot of ideas about how the pros and cons are all mixed up together. These tools can be incredibly helpful. And more important, there were comments about how students are going to have to use these as part of their training because they're going to be integrated into their careers. And we're going to have to ensure we're assessing their ability to use them. But at the same time, as a potential risk, how are we assessing the students' work as their own and that we're measuring what they're learning?
Sure. So we had a lot of interesting comments. Yes, risks and benefits. They go in partnership. So I guess one of the benefits you mentioned was, Gen AI teaches us all to be more adaptable together. And at the same time, we're all having to adapt together, which is the con, I guess. Pithy point, would we say that you had to have a driving test if you were driving a self-driving car? Would you pass if you were put it in self-drive mode? So there's a lot of questions, as you said, Trey, around authentic assessment. How do we get back to the basics, right? Especially in freshman writing. Are we doing blue books? Are we doing in-person writing? All of the devices are up. Or how can we have our learners look at the output of Gen AI and look at it critically and say, how would I grade this paper that came out of this tool, right? So using it as a way to teach our learners to edit content, maybe to trust but verify, or don't trust at all and also verify. There were questions around policy, so I would say, a baseline policy is something faculty are asking for, even though we know that's not going to solve all the problems, and tools for faculty and faculty development in the face of the fact that faculty don't have time for faculty development, and we may not be able to force them into faculty development. But again, it's all about learning together, getting our faculty to learn with us.
In our sections, we broke up into mini groups, and so I'm going to summarize generally the common themes across all of the groups. Certainly a lot along the lines of opportunity around better designed and scaffolded assignments, a variety of assignments, better ways of engaging with students, and it's like another way of basically building excitement into what you're learning because it has such clear connections with so many people's careers. In terms of risks, similar kinds of things that come up in terms of, well, there's this promise of time savings, but then are we actually going to save that time and get it back, or is that just going to be lost time? A couple of specific examples in terms of, just other risks. Like it's kind of highlighting the same challenges that we've kind of ignored for a while. And so is this an opportunity to actually deal with those challenges along the lines of academic honesty, faculty, assignment design, and those kinds of things in terms of engaging with students?
Yeah, some specific use cases like writing, something obviously that we hear a lot about in conversations about AI. I'm interested policy a little bit, and then I'm interested, I think, across the four groups, something that came up in our pre-panel moderator call was this gray area sort of in the middle between benefit and risk, this almost risky benefit space of learning Gen AI alongside students.
Right.
I kind of, the scariness of it, but the potential magic too.
At this point, the group split up again to consider the risks and benefits of Gen AI in teaching and learning related to equity and access for students. The reporting out starts with Auburn University's Asim Ali, WashU's Emily Thompson, Johns Hopkins' Mike Reese, and Kentucky's Trey Conatser.
Certainly a couple of key themes emerging, one around the rich getting richer. Certainly access is a huge piece of it. How do we make sure that people are able to access the tools? Certainly the free ones are available, but that seems like a gloss over of in terms of the quality of what's available, because there is a clear difference between the different models. Another thing that also emerges is just, traditionally or historically in the U.S., a lot of the emergence of technology innovation has come from public sources like the government investments and things like that. In this case, it's coming entirely from for-profit companies. We have no insight into how they're coming up with the information, this black box idea, and that certainly has impact on equity and access in a way that we don't even quite know how to understand because there's such limited information and conversation around those topics. So certainly a lot of conversation around the risks of that. The benefits, I think, again, similarly, if we're able to do it right, this does have the ability to reach more people. This does create an ability to elevate the conversation in ways that we've traditionally struggled to do so.
Emily?
So starting with benefits, I would say, great point, and people have pointed this out. Folks with language skill issues, or ESL folks perhaps, may use these tools in a way to create baseline equity. However, on the other side, we may have anti-plagiarism tools like Turnitin or others that might trip on that usage, right? So we have kind of that risk and benefit side. In general, I would say, yes, we did focus on cost and maybe providing as a university that baseline tool that all of our students and faculty can use, right? So that some schools have Copilot that they're providing. We're providing ChatGPT, as are others, in an environment that's safe and doesn't take our IP and is HIPAA and FERPA compliant and all that fun stuff. But even then, right, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone can use it equitably and can access it because maybe the students and the faculty aren't prepared. They don't know how this works. They don't know how to use it. So I would just say kind of the theme that may have arisen is we might need to take a look at our curriculum and look at maybe some early tools for students and faculty development for both our learners and our faculty to help them understand how to use these tools to support their learning and teaching. So good conversation.
Mike?
I will say the overall theme of our group was intentionality in thinking about the issues of equity and bias. And what was interesting is we talked a little bit about concerns and opportunities for students. So in terms of students, we have the haves and have-nots, as we keep talking about. Some students have access to these tools because of parents or their institution. Others may not, whether they're online students or in-person students who are residential and have access on the campus. But for international students, it might actually be beneficial in terms of translating documents or helping them translate their own work before they submit it. And then there was also some questions around faculty access, as we have faculty or the haves and have-nots, or at least the early adopters and the laggards. And so if these are going to become important tools, how do we intentionally reach out to faculty who may not traditionally engage with technology to show them the value of these, but also the risks that they need to overcome? And then also sort of at a higher level, the macro level issues of when faculty are using these tools is making sure they're aware of the structural biases that are represented in these tools. And so the examples that may be coming up may not truly be diverse. So being intentional about the prompting that we use to develop more diverse examples.
So we had a lot of resonance with what everyone has already shared. To add some other things, we discussed the uneven landscape of, at least currently, how these technologies are showing up in the classrooms and the degree to which students might feel empowered or encouraged to use them in different classrooms. And this can overlap with other kinds of pre-existing equity issues, whether it's students who are more familiar with navigating that kind of landscape of the classroom, the policies, what the social code and the social contract of the school is. We also talked about kind of detectors as well, because this is something that still looms very large in the imagination, particularly of instructors, and how these are kind of posing lots of issues around equity, whether it is the documented issues around language learners or documented issues around how the detectors themselves are largely ineffective once you kind of stop doing the in toto copy and paste kind of a thing, and whether or not that means we're just sort of punishing students who are not as good at using generative AI for their learning. But all of that points to this need to kind of have a more even landscape around who has access to a sense of what these tools are bad at and good at, and how to be kind of informed users so that we can, not only use them in accordance with classroom policies, but also so that we can not kind of skip over our learning opportunities. So
concerns about bias within the tools, access to the tools, uneven deployment of the tools, different levels of savviness in terms of students' ability to use the tools, and then kind of overarching concerns about increasing the space between the haves and have-nots within higher ed. And then it seems like on the flip side, Gen AI's and AI in general's potential to alleviate a lot of those problems in the ways that they already exist across higher ed. Okay, and then our last question: what strategies and principles should guide our work in helping various campus groups, students, faculty, staff, and administrators manage the risks and potential benefits of learning and teaching amid the rise of generative AI? So here is policy, engagement, faculty support, all these other things that we really sort of have touched a little bit so far, but talking about them directly here now.
This episode of The Key is sponsored by Mongoose, a holistic higher ed engagement partner that empowers institutions to connect with prospective and current students, as well as alumni and donors, through text, chat, and actionable insights. Mongoose, designed for higher ed, by higher ed, is committed to helping leaders like you advance your university's mission. Learn more today at www.hellomongoose.com.
You're listening to a new episode of Inside Higher Ed's Key Podcast, which features excerpts of a discussion at our Digital Universities U.S. conference on the impact of generative AI on teaching and learning. We'll next hear the group leaders respond to Colleen Flaherty's question about one strategy or principle that their colleagues thought should ideally guide their integration of AI into teaching and learning, starting with Trey Conatser of the University of Kentucky.
In one example, we discussed how going back to what we heard about in a previous session, the North Star, if we have a strategic plan, if we have guiding goals and principles, those can be very helpful as a strategy in addressing the deployment of generative AI on our campuses, policy making around generative AI on our campuses, and engaging what can be these otherwise consuming issues around do we ban it or not, what sort of policy in terms of integrity, et cetera, but are there larger goals and values that we can find in our strategic plans and whatnot. So that was one strategy we talked about.
So if we start with the idea that we need more student-centric teaching, and then we acknowledge that there are many faculty who may be thinking of, okay, well, this new technology is there, so students are going to try to figure out how to use it in a negative way. So that means if we harken back to what Phil said in his introductory comments, we have to create new incentive models at our institutions, modify the P&T processes so we are clearly signaling to all faculty that there is a renewed focus on what we actually want, not just as a result of these technologies, but just how do we improve education as a whole.
I guess we all need to recognize together Gen AI is here to stay. So that's one thing. And we are not going to prevent it from occurring or from our students or our faculty from using this tool. So we shouldn't be changing our principles. I think our Agnes Scott friend pointed that out, right? We are who we are as an institution and we believe what we believe, right? But we have this new tool that we now have to integrate into that. So we did talk a little bit about career placement, talking to industry partners, maybe working this gnarly problem at a multi-institutional level, not all alone, because we're all going to have to facing this together, right? We are all looking for what is the skill set in each discipline-specific area that's needed in the Gen AI/AI space, right? It's going to be very different in healthcare. It's going to be very different in art. It's going to be very different in social work. So how can we, again, provide our learners and faculty the tools that they need to move forward? So it was a good conversation, I think. Everyone got a little bit out of it, but yes, I like the idea of digital proficiencies was also brought up, core competencies. What are the core competencies that our learners must have with and without the presence of AI, right? What will they have to do unscaffolded? What is it okay for them to do scaffolded? So that's gnarly problems that aren't going to be solved today.
So if education shines a light in the darkness, that's why many of us are in this business. We should be thinking about professional development for ourselves and our other constituents that are going to be using these tools. So we had a number of comments about the role of professional development. And two things I'll add to that is that in putting those programs together, we need groups, whether it's centers for academic innovation or digital innovation, that are collecting case studies and uses to be able to share. And another plug I'll put in is for our librarians. My office sat physically in the library, even though we weren't. And essentially, we're talking about information literacy skills, so we should be working with our librarians on this as well.
Okay, so collaboration, student-centered teaching, not operating from a place of trying to control the beast, but kind of working with it, and thinking about and studying like diversity of use cases, because it's going to look different. Gen AI is going to look different in every way that it's applied. Okay, so we have done great work. We have managed to arrive with 5 minutes left. I would like to open it up for Q&A.
We did talk about briefly. So AI is great in terms of speed, because they scan large amount of databases we can never do, and quickly gives you an answer. So let's say you search for, give me an example of all this data, including citation, and great, boom, you get the results. But if you actually check the DOI, they don't exist. So who is going to check the accuracy and quality of the AI work? So we almost need a separate AI. I would call it validation AI or quality control AI, but we need a dedicated team to just develop that, just so that we can check the accuracy of the result AI is, giving out.
I'll just say in response to that as well, in terms of just the comment about speed. For me, a provocative idea that's emerged in the discourse recently is slowness. And that is the notion of using this in education, which is, this was not a technology invented for education first and foremost, right? Using this in education where we often kind of skip over this observation, take it for granted that this is something that does things very quickly and can make our lives much more efficient by doing things quickly and automating all of our tasks for us, right? But one of the things that we can do is think about where slowness is actually a productive use of generative AI in teaching and learning for student learning, where it can actually encourage them to slow down. Like you talked about checking things, right? That's just one kind of example. But where slowness and friction and seamfulness, not seamlessness, is the moment of learning. So I've just found that kind of to be a provocative kind of big idea.
Is anybody using any open source based models? Like you can throw like a general adversarial model together or something, right? With like an open source model, but like nobody that I know is using it. They're all in GPT, Enterprise, or they're all in Claude.
Tested them, but the hurdles are just too many for the average user. And that's the challenge that we've had,
Yeah, you got a good idea.
I wanted to share, just in
implement.
terms of the hurdles that we're seeing from the principal. We developed that course, like I mentioned, with the teaching with AI. But so once you understand, okay, I should design an assignment that uses generative AI. What next? The next hurdle that we saw was faculty saying, well, I don't want to be the expert in the classroom just because I want to use this in my assignment. So we actually have developed and published in Canvas Commons. So if you're a Canvas campus, you can look in the Canvas Commons under Auburn University. We've actually developed little modules. So if you design an assignment that uses generative AI, you can actually drop in a module and say, look, I'm not the expert on teaching you how to do this, but you can go through this module. It'll level you up in terms of the ethics involved and the how-to of actually doing it, and that way you're more prepared to do this assignment. And so there are ways of kind of tackling those hurdles as we get to them. But yeah, I mean, the open models, there's just too many hurdles. There are AI tools that you say it's not called validation AI. That's maybe a more, that goes with naming things what they actually do, and we don't do that. That's a waste of time. But if you look at tools like Consensus and Elicit and Research Rabbit and stuff, those are very useful for being able to do research questions and see cited results because they're trained on a limited set, but a growing set of published research.
I want to add one thing I forgot to mention. So Bosch U has an enterprise level GPT, and it's HIPAA compliant. So there are times like physicians, or they might have questions related to protected health information or PI. So definitely we need a safe environment where we can ask the questions, honestly get the answer. So HIPAA compliance is another one. You can kind of customize your open AI ChatGPT, for example. So there are a lot of things we have to keep into consideration to develop something that is ethical and is safe to use.
Hey, it is 11:30. We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much.
That was Colleen Flaherty of Inside Higher Ed, striving to quickly wrap up on time a compelling conversation she led at the Digital Universities U.S. conference this month at Washington University in St. Louis. Thanks to Colleen and her panelists Asim Ali, Emily Thompson, Michael Reese, and Trey Conatser for their thoughtful insights about the role of AI in teaching and learning. Thanks also to Mongoose for helping us bring this and other important conversations to you. It's increasingly clear to me, from that discussion and some of the others I've listened in on in recent weeks, that while we remain very early in the generative AI era in post-secondary education, the conversations are getting more sophisticated as more and more academics are engaging with AI tools and contemplating the benefits and downsides of doing so. I don't think we quite grasp the full potential that this technology can have on how professors teach and students learn. How could we, given how quickly AI is developing and how minimal our line of sight is into the big technology companies that are doing most of the development? But conversations like this one show that there are clearly lots of smart and insightful and caring people on our campuses paying close attention with the interests of their students and their colleagues and their institutions in mind. That's all for this episode of The Key. We'll be back to you next week with another, and until then, stay well and stay safe.